You keep speaking of this love thing, like it's something that I should know. But where I come from, it was never shown. When you speak of love, I'm not really clear. Because the only thing that stirs inside of me is my fear. You say that you love me, but what does that mean? Because my father said it and it didn't mean anything. Show me. Show me what you speak of. Because the aching in my heart needs to know. And touch me. Touch me deep enough to stop this aching thirst so I can be free. I just want to be free. Undeniably, love is one of those crazy, mixed-up words whose definition is as unique as the individual who is proclaiming it to another. If I hosted a dinner party and told the guests to bring their family along, some would show up with their spouse. Others would include their spouse and children, and then there would be some who would believe that the invitation included their spouse, children, parents, and siblings. If I was the manager of a large office in corporate America and I pulled my team of subordinates together for a pep talk and simply stated that I wanted them to work as hard as they could and that would be good enough, some employees would interpret this to mean working through their lunch hour. Another might imagine banking overtime, and then there would be others who would believe that this meant taking their work home with them. Definitions are the contextual information that bring understanding and unity to many of our life moments. But for the most part, we don't actually sit down and compose these definitions. We pretty much adopt them from another source. In fact, there's very little self-produced data on our personal hard drives. In your early years of development, if mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, sister, brother said it was so, then it pretty much was committed to memory and it became so. Most of the time, we aren't motivated to mess around with these built-in definitions, unless, of course, we discover that it isn't serving our life very well. And even then, we will often jump to the conclusion that there's nothing wrong with our definition. It's that other person's definition that's all wrong. Once we commit to a belief or definition, we are very devoted to this understanding, and it becomes enormously difficult to overturn or amend our position. Our culture has a lot to do with this. Most of us grow up in homes where things are either black or white, good or bad. Most parenting styles have very little gray area because gray lends itself to less control, more open-mindedness, and of course, greater risk that you can't be controlled. I don't know when last you took a long, hard look at the way this world attempts to conform and dominate the way you behave and the way you think. But it's everywhere, if only you will pay attention. Now, don't misunderstand my direction here. I'm not suggesting that structure and definitions are not essential to life, but staying open to growing and evolving is just as vital to the evolution of who you are and who you will become. Our brains have the capacity to take in 400 billion bits of information every second. That's a number and a speed of execution that you can't even fathom. Our subconscious, based on definitions and programming, chops that down to about 2,000 bits of information per second, and that's still a pretty impressive number. In fact, to gain some association to this figure, you'd have to take a pencil and dot a piece of paper with 10 dots per second, which would require an enormous amount of practice. And you'd have to dot the paper at this pace for 3.5 minutes to represent the flow of information at 2,000 bits per second. Extraordinary. But the most staggering number of all, from all that information flowing into our brain, we actually only use 1/2 of 1/1,000,000% of that information. I get nauseous just thinking about that. What a waste of potential. And the primary reason for this wastefulness is pretty much tied to those first 7 years of programming in our life. The first 7 years are essentially that period where we take in data, observe, memorize, pattern, duplicate, remember, learn, and collect the information that ultimately becomes the programming for our subconscious. The subconscious dictates about 95% of all that we do each and every day. It's because of this high degree of automation that we can accomplish so much in each day. Now, 95% of anything indicates a lot of control. If the operation of your car was 95% controlled by the car, you'd want to be certain that the programming was up to date, applicable, and serving the best interests of the car and ensuring your overall safety from destination to destination. If it wasn't, you could end up just about anywhere in the world. So programming matters. Running on old ideas and beliefs could make life much harder and even compromise things like your health and happiness. We have about 100 billion nerve cells in our brain with innumerable extensions, and we create neural pathways. Think of those neural pathways like superhighways. You know, the kind they build around large cities like Atlanta, Georgia. We build these highways to create the shortest and most efficient way to get from one place to another. Our brains do the same thing. Our roads and highways are set up early in our life, and most of this information is based on the repetition of what we hear and experience most often. Once your pathways are set up, you pretty much stop traveling everywhere else, and we build these routes based on what is most familiar to us and least complicated. Another way of looking at these highways is boxes. Based on our beliefs, we have a personal collection of boxes that represent what we believe. So if I said the word family, and you grew up in a single parent home, your family box would have only one parent as part of your belief and experience. To you, this is family. So when was the last time you evaluated your programming? Running on old information also causes us to be very limited in our thinking, and the more limited we are, the less cooperative and integrated we can be in relationship with ourselves and with others. Limited thinking also isolates us and keeps us from growing our beliefs. So, let's back up the truck and connect the dots between our established definition of what love is and all the information stored in our subconscious. There are a few reasons why this definition of love is so very critical to the flow and happiness of our lives. Without a clearly identified interpretation of what love is, we tend to default in our understanding around what we've experienced and what we were taught. This can be problematic. If your definition was pulled together based on the painful moments in your life, it will be skewed and inaccurate. If you've simply allowed others to inform your definition based on parenting and those first 7 years, this will be limited to the interpretation of that handful of people. Now, if you were fortunate enough to come from a home where a healthy version of love was expressed and upheld, then you're further ahead in the game than most. For the child who grew up with an alcoholic, or lived with a physically abusive parent, or was exposed to a caregiver who was addicted to drugs, or perhaps fostered out because there was no parent, even the emotionally broken parents are doing the best they can, and in spite of their shortcomings, they would insist that their expressions were rooted in love. But if our understanding of love is not allowed to emerge beyond these often unfortunate beginnings, our broken and misinformed definitions make it impossible to experience the beauty, the comfort, and protection of all that love was supposed to be. So imagine being one of the less fortunate when acquiring your understanding of love. You grow up and venture out into the world to connect with others. You soon ascertain that what you've been calling love appears not to be working in your personal relationships. Even when our definition of love is not working, we don't automatically assume that something is faulty with our version. We often conclude again that it must be the other person, and we stick with the analysis sometimes for many years. When you begin to connect with others, you quickly establish that there is indeed many ideas about what love is. Some will state that love is staying together even if you physically abuse or call each other names every day. Others demonstrate love as a legal, contractual agreement, but still award themselves license to entertain other members of the opposite sex or an open relationship of sorts. Yet others will control and micromanage the actions of their loved one and insist that this is still love. So if tomorrow I handed you a check for $50,000 and I said, go buy yourself the finest automobile that money can afford you, once you close your mouth from disbelief, you will begin the adventure of searching for the perfect bucket of bolts. Now, this pursuit is not something you will enter into lightly. You will no doubt research the consumer reviews on various possibilities. Your analysis will also include some hands-on experience, test driving several options. You will investigate everything from gas mileage to repair logs, safety features, and of course the most ideal color choice. At some point, you will no doubt review the operating manual and become much more intimately connected to your highly anticipated investment. You want to know everything you possibly can before bringing home this beautiful new acquisition. It would not be unreasonable to believe that you might spend several weeks, months, or even a year in determining the perfect choice just for you. Now, this is just a car we're speaking of. How much more consideration should be given to the most valuable relationships you choose to be connected to? What does your operating manual for relationships look like? That's really what your definition of love is. It's your guide for connection. Love is not limited to the language of our feelings. It also gives us boundaries. Since it's clear that not everyone has come from a healthy love experience, we need to champion our rendition of standards for the selection and operation of connecting with others and ourselves. Love is so much more than our feelings. And if we limit our definition to the chemical urges that manifest inside of us, what do we do when those urges begin to dissipate? Attraction does have a very profound effect on our physicality. The body responds to connection with a very sophisticated execution of chemicals and hormones that support kinship and association. Perhaps this is where our delusions around love sometimes begin. Maybe we are confusing the hormonal cascade of chemicals brought on by attraction as love. We've all experienced the immediacy of a crush, where your pulse races, you go weak in the knees, and your head reels with excitement. So strong are these feelings that they are responsible for launching 1,000 love songs and poems. But it's more than just a metaphor. The connection of two human beings does indeed impact our bodies in measurable ways. You feel different, and you are different. Dopamine is the brain's pleasure chemical. It plays a role in gambling, drug use, and in connection. When we become attracted to someone, dopamine is released, and this is the chemical that inspires couples to feel elated and energetic about each other. It is the substance that triggers goal-oriented behavior where no one else matters but your new partner. Oxytocin is a chemical that calms and bonds couples together by promoting intimacy. It is the hugging, kissing, and touching hormone, and experts believe there is a higher percentage of this chemical in women versus men. Although testosterone is thought of as the macho hormone, it does help stoke the fire in both sexes. Sex can drive up your testosterone levels, and men naturally have more of this hormone. And there is a theory that when people lock lips, the transfer of this hormone could increase sexual desire in a partner. Another possible ingredient in the love potion is norepinephrine. This stress hormone increases the heart rate and may be the reason you feel hot and flustered when that special someone notices you. It also might be responsible for those butterflies in your stomach sensation, sweaty palms, dry mouth, and fumbling words. The major histocompatibility complex is a set of genes that controls cell surface molecules, which the body uses to identify yourself from foreign invaders. Our bodies exude MHC levels through sweat and body odor, as well as saliva. There are a wide variety of MHC types, but they tend to more closely match in people who are related. Based on scent and taste, studies suggest we can pick up on these MHC levels in other people, and it's thought that the more you differ in MHC, the stronger the attraction. Many believe that the attraction to someone is first based on sight, but your nose also plays a part too. Something called pheromones, which are chemical messengers, theorized but not yet proven, to play a part in human sexual attraction. Several experts believe smell is a part of the allure. Once you connect closely with someone, their smell can be powerful in its influence and in attraction. If that information proves nothing, it certainly confirms that a lot of biological activity unfolds when we become interested in someone. So let's just pause here for a moment and crack open a couple of commonly used phrases to define the release of all that cellular action. When the human body begins to manifest the results of those hormones and chemicals, we often rush to judgment and are sometimes guilty of spontaneously stating that we're in love. How could all those incredible feelings not be love? But upon closer inspection, what you can ascertain is that your body is communicating with you and simply suggesting that this new person might be a great new connection for friendship and possibly more. But love in the sense of being charitable and unconditional is several hundred miles away from your current location. We call it love when we become captivated by a new person in our life. But is that love or just heightened emotions? Feelings come and go. So is love a feeling? Is love transient? Should feelings have anything to do with love? You hear people passionately state that they love pizza, or they love a book, or they love the latest fashions, but real love has nothing to do with any of those things. You enjoy them, you wear them, you experience them, but love is a strong expression being awarded to things that simply don't apply. Someone may tell you that they love you, but that statement and our ability to believe it hinges on evidence. It's easy to communicate love in the absence of friction or challenge. So how is love measured? Most of us have parents who told us they loved us. But what if their understanding of love was corrupted by the example that showed them love? What if their expressions didn't appear to be loving at all? We often hear the phrase, God is love. And included in this statement is usually a long list of conditions that must be met that warrant receiving his love. So is love performance-based? Do we earn love? What is love? Do you have a definition of love? Since love appears to govern so much of our existence, seems as though it might be rather critical to get a really good handle on what this whole love thing is and is not. Without a definition of love, we can't be sure of what love is. Without a definition of love, it's questionable that we can give love or receive it. And without a definition of love, we have no direction, we have no goal, and we have no standard. Deborah Anna Poe wrote that the most powerful force in the world is not gravity, it's love. She states, love does not come with conditions, stipulations, agenda, or codes. It cannot be bought, sold, or traded. You cannot make someone love you, nor can you prevent it. Love cannot be imprisoned, nor can it be legislated. Love is not a substance, not a commodity, nor even a marketable power source. Love has no territory, no borders, no quantifiable mass or energy output. One can buy loyalty, companionship, attention, perhaps even compassion, but love itself, it can't be bought. Love cannot be turned on as a reward, it cannot be turned off as a punishment. Love speaks out for justice and protests when harm is being done. Love points out the consequences of hurting oneself or others. Love allows room for anger, grief, or pain to be expressed and released. But love does not threaten to withhold itself if it doesn't get what it wants. C.S. Lewis identified various types of love in his book called The Four Loves. The first being storage love, which is the liking of someone through the fondness of familiarity, family members, or people who relate in familiar ways that have otherwise found themselves bonded by chance. An example of this is the natural love and affection of a parent for their child. It is described as the most natural, emotive, and widely diffused of loves. Philia is the love between friends, as close as siblings in strength and duration. The friendship is the strong bond existing between people who share common values, interests, or activities. Lewis describes friendship as the least biological, organic, instinctive, gregarious, and necessary, the least natural of loves. Eros is love in the sense of being in love or loving someone, as opposed to the raw sexuality of what is called Venus love. The illustration used in the distinction between wanting a woman, which is Venus love, and wanting one particular woman, which is Eros love. Charity is the love that serves regardless of changing circumstances. It's unconditional. This one is the greatest of the other three loves. The natural loves are not self-sufficient to the love of our Creator and spiritual Father, which is a charitable love. So take a moment and just ask yourself this all-important question. Where did love come from? When you were born, did your mom and dad introduce you to love? Is love somebody? Or is it this mystical urge to simply be kind? Can you recall a time when love wasn't in your life and then it was? Love certainly can't be classified as a trend because it seemingly never goes out of style. Is love a switch? Do you turn it on? Do you turn it off? Do you seem to be able to control when you love and when you don't? Love had to come from somewhere. Have you ever considered where that might be? I liken love to breathing. In the same way that we can't live without breathing, neither can we live without love. Love has the potential to be one of the greatest feelings we can experience. But it is also because of love that we can also sometimes sustain some of our greatest pain. God's the easy answer, and if you have some historical background or belief in God, then this answer falls nicely into place. But what if you don't? What if God was never a subject discussed in your home, and consequently you have no association to His love story? Some people say that the universe loves them. But what is the universe? And how is it different from God? When we hurt, when we are afraid, when we fear, when we cry, often without any conscious thought, we find ourselves talking to someone we call God or the universe. Whether we identify that force by name or not, we inherently seem to believe that someone or something much bigger than ourselves is watching and hears us when we reach out. When you Google the word love, the page populates with all kinds of references to quotes offered from a book called the Bible. This book called the Bible was authored by 40 different individuals and was composed over a span of 1,500 years. It's a pretty remarkable and inspired collection of stories and quotes, but the greatest miracle about the creation of this book is that in spite of the hundreds of years it took to write, the authors, they all told the same story. What are the odds that 40 different people who lived in varying centuries could reveal a manuscript that basically kept telling the same incredible love story? Lots of important men have walked on this earth, and one of them is a man named Jesus. He gets the credit for composing the most popular and utilized definition of love. In fact, he appears to be the only man on record for creating the official definition of what love is. His description of love was something he was passionate about, and it was something he shared with everyone he came in contact with. So how many people need to love you to feel loved? What's the magic number? Is there a special kind of person that has to love you for you to feel loved? John the Apostle stated that there is no room in love for fear. Well-formed love banishes fear. Since fear is crippling, a fearful life, fear of death, fear of judgment, is one not yet fully formed in love. Marianne Williamson once said, "Love is what we're born with, and fear is what we learn here." There are all kinds of life experiences where a definition of love is going to be the deal breaker in how you manage life. Things like, say, the woman who sits beside you at work who's just proclaimed that she is gay. Is your definition of love big enough to include her? Or a very close friend has asked you for assistance. She needs you to watch your kids after school for a couple of weeks. 2 weeks turns into 4 and she never pays you the agreed upon fee for babysitting. Is your definition unconditional enough to be generous and help those less fortunate? You've just discovered that your sister has had an affair with your husband. Will you give up on love or dig deeper and fight for your love? Your mother or father never told you they loved you, and for the most part were emotionally absent from your child rearing? Can you be empathetic and extend grace to them, knowing they were doing the best they could with what they knew? And will you extend forgiveness to them, or will you remain bitter? Someone at work has just lost their spouse to cancer. They were married for 35 years. Everybody does the visitation and funeral home thing. But when will your next point of contact be? 2 weeks? 2 months? 6 months? 10 months? Or will you simply figure they can manage without your support and love? You've decided to help out a coworker who has been having troubles paying the bills and getting through life. You send some home-baked meals. You include some gift cards. You call to follow up. And you even offer to drive when their car needs repair. They never say thank you. How do you manage your emotions in those circumstances? Does your definition of love demand applause and recognition, or does generosity bring purpose to your life? What will you include in your operating manual for relationships? What standards are important to you in the creation of your love definition? How will these standards influence the interview process when considering a forever love with someone special? To keep the definition clean from offenses or self-promoted protection, we need some outside influence, and my suggestion is the love code utilized in the Loveless to Love program. My hope is that this video will inspire the creation of your own definition of love, and I'm going to give you some suggestions and areas to focus on. Keep your mind focused on a definition that you yourself would like to be on the receiving end of. Let that be your guide in its creation. Your definition has to transcend time, trends, and opinions, so it needs to be sustainable and something you're prepared to commit to regardless of circumstances. Including patience in your definition won't be just beneficial to others, but it will be for yourself as well. How are you prepared to bear the offenses of others with kindness? How will you overcome the temptation to be offended? Contentment is another important consideration, which is different than settling. Contentment finds peace in the present, but strives for more. There is no faster way to kill any connection than to judge or condemn the differences you see in others. Only your ego believes you are the one with all the answers. Your spirit and your heart are open to all kinds of possibilities, and open is the best status. You don't have to think alike to love alike. A loving person doesn't have to be right or win the argument. Being right, it's highly overrated. Peace is a personal choice, and it doesn't have to be influenced by indifference. Relationships flourish in an environment where the character of love is predictable and consistent. This means we'll have to work harder to control our emotions and the firing of your amygdala. Feeling safe and protected encourages transparency and vulnerability, and these are some of the finest moments we share with each other. But love also passionately fights for justice and truth. Perhaps the biggest struggle in the development of this guiding commentary is the commitment to always believing, never losing hope, and remaining constant in contradiction. That's a characterization that sounds so incredible, and it's a place we'd all like to be a part of. But our emotional injuries have made it very challenging to believe this is possible. And it's really not possible without our safe place and a connection to something bigger than ourselves. Love gives us purpose. It moves us beyond ourselves. But perhaps one of the greatest uses for your definition of love is in the selection of those we desire to have long-term personal relationships with. On so many occasions, I sit with couples who believe they found love, but have encountered problems in trying to live together and love together. My first question is usually to inquire as to whether they have a definition of love, and if the two of them have compared notes on these personal operating manuals before deciding to build a life together. This is the point in the conversation where they both look at each other, and then they look at me like I have 3 heads. Seems like a perfectly great question to me. If you'll spend weeks, months, or even a year considering what new vehicle you will purchase, then how much more consideration should a lifetime relationship receive? That's like buying a Mercedes and coming home with the operating manual for a Jeep Cherokee. The interview process for one of the most important relationships in your life deserves investigation and clearly stated standards that you believe serve the interest of both parties. But far too often, couples fly from the euphoria of biology, and when that runs dry, so does the connection. The creation of a love definition first and foremost tells the world that you're worth the effort of such clarification. A woman or man who knows what the character of love represents and its usefulness in protecting the beauty of who that person is someone you want to connect with. And it will be someone that you can have a lasting love with. Without a definition, anything goes. And without your own carefully crafted and established belief, you've become prey or will become prey to those wounded individuals who have twisted the standard to accommodate their emotional wounding. A distrusting sumo will operate more from the character of fear than from the character of love. A misaligned definition will have built-in control features that give the injured sumo enough license to micromanage, conditionally participate, and manifest his or her greatest fears. Unhealthy definitions exhibit unreasonable expectations and an appetite for conformity that can never be satisfied. What's worse, a connection like this will try to convince you that these measures of restriction and domination are only there because they love you. But as we've discovered earlier in this video, love is content. Love does not judge or control. Love is patient and kind. Love doesn't have to be right. Love feels safe and protected, and love never gives up. And this is where we separate the women from the girls, the men from the boys, and the healthy from the bitter. An injured, unforgiving, and bitter sumo cannot do relationship, because relationship where the standard of love is respected and upheld requires a releasing of power and the trust and faith in another person. I can think of no better investment into yourself than the existence of your love definition. It's a must-do, can't live without, go love or go home kind of document. And if each person would commit to its creation, how different our world would be. You're worth the time and effort. You are worthy of a great love. So no more settling or compromising. Be the compass in a lost and hurting world, and be committed to love in its most celebrated version. This is Marilee, inspiring you to leave every moment better than you found it. Until next time, be patient, be kind, be generous, be forgiving, and know that you are loved.